everyone, if we've never met before, I'm Tasha of TashaCouldMakeThat.com, formerly by GumByGolly.com, and I've been a vintage blogger for over a decade, and now I'm on YouTube. So a little bit about me, I sew and knit the majority of my wardrobe and have blogged about a lot of that over the years. Fashion is definitely my happy place, but I also love all sorts of crafts and dabble in other things like making vintage lucite inspired resin jewelry, buttons and belt buckle slides, also for fashion obviously. Felt applique, one very slowly progressing needlepoint pillow project that I designed for our living room that I really need to get back to someday, and pretty much anything crafty I'm game to try. I'm also an occasional knitwear designer. Several years ago, I released a few knitting patterns, and in early 2022, after many years of saying I would never design patterns again, and I would certainly never design sweater patterns for others, I changed my mind, and I jumped back into the design game. So I ended up releasing 3 vintage-inspired sweater patterns last year. This is one of them, and a beret pattern too. And I've just released a 4th sweater pattern, but more on that in a little bit. P.S. You can find my patterns on Ravelry and Payhip. I'll put the links in the description. So speaking of things I said I'd never do, all of this. I've done sewing project videos on Instagram stories for years, kind of like live vlogging projects where I walk through what I'm working on, go over my muslins and adjustments, sometimes give tips and pointers, walk through pattern hacks, all sorts of stuff like that. In fact, you can find some of those on my Instagram stories highlights, usually for bigger projects like coats and vintage style jeans. So I'll link to my Instagram account in the description too. But even though I would do photo-based tutorials on my blog, I always said I wouldn't do YouTube, in part because it's so much work, which it still is. I have definitely confirmed that now. But even so, I started to come around to the idea at the end of last year for various reasons, including wanting to reach new people and explore different ways of creating content. So here we are. Anyway, I don't know exactly what I'll do with this channel, but I have a couple of things that I'm definitely going to focus on. For one, it'll probably be a lot of vintage-inspired sewing projects. The type of projects I usually sew are casual 1950s inspired fashion, since that's sort of my personal style wheelhouse. And I sew with a lot of vintage patterns and occasionally modern retro ones and reproductions too. My sewing projects often have a heavy dose of pattern hacking in there because I love fussing with patterns and turning a basic pattern into a tried and true pattern that I can repeat with various tweaks over and over, or just using a new fun print. And speaking of prints, there's always a lot of print matching and plaid in my sewing because I wear a lot of prints, and I find matching prints and particularly matching plaid really satisfying. My first sewing project soon on here will be walking through a particular dress pattern mashup that I've done with a vintage and a modern pattern, and sewing another one of those. It's a pattern combo that I really love, and I've sewn it several times. Then in the knitting vein for this channel, I'll probably include tips and maybe occasional tutorials, perhaps looks into what I'm designing and working on. But in particular, I'm going to kick things off in the knitting department soon here on the channel with a knit along for my most recently released vintage inspired sweater pattern, the Wondrella cardigan, which I'm super excited about. I think you'll love it. I hope there's a you on the other side of this screen because if not, I'm talking to myself. But if there's somebody there, I think you'll love it. And then after that, we'll see what else strikes my fancy here for the channel. But I figure I need to start somewhere, right? So that's what this little intro is for, to kind of make it all official like. And so since I have you here, how about a quick sewing studio tour? I mean, studio kind of sounds fancy, but I can't really say sewing room because it's basically a quarter of our basement. I only have these 2 walls. So I go with sewing studio or sewing area. But let me show you where I make all the pretty things. Random interjected fact. If you know me and you've seen me on video before on Instagram stories and you happen to notice that I'm either talking different or maybe look slightly different, I actually started Invisalign, so I'm wearing clear aligners during the filming of this, so that's why. Welcome to my basement sewing studio. So you'll have to forgive the lighting because, as I said, this is a basement. This is also winter, and so I live in Chicago and it's very dark outside. I thought I'd get some natural light, but it doesn't look like we're going to get any for a week, so this is what you get. So here we go. This is my sewing area and I love it. I have basically designed the whole layout of this myself to do exactly what I wanted it to do. The first and biggest, literally, thing in here is my custom cutting table. And this is obviously very, very tidy right now, but it is, I'm not gonna lie, it is a gigantic crap collector, as you would probably expect a table of this size to be. But this is something that I designed from stuff from IKEA. And in fact, I have a blog post about this specific table, so you can find that on my blog. But it's 4 Kallax units basically, and then 2 tabletops that I covered in this really, really pretty oilcloth. And then, there you can see it. And then I covered it with a custom cut self-sealing cutting mat. Granted, this is, you know, it's not the most self-sealing, but I did this I think 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and it served me perfectly well, and I use it a ton, so it's done its job. All these cubbies are where I store my fabric. So I've got the novelty print department and florals. My vintage fabric is these 2 cubbies. Maybe I'll do a little walkthrough of those someday. I've got all my knits on this side. And then, ooh, I gotta scoot past my dress form. This is reality. These are all my bottom weights and suitings and coatings and stuff. Everything in here, as you can see, is kind of matchy, which is my aesthetic. Let's face it, if you know me, that will not surprise you in the least. When I designed this space, I also plotted out things like when we put together this bookcase, I put fabric behind it. So I'm super excited how that looks. And then, I don't know, you can kind of start to tell that there is a travel theme in here. So it took me a few years after I designed this space to come up with an appropriate theme. It's not exactly all travel related. This is sort of my department of mysteries because I love mysteries and I love Nancy Drew. That's the one really that started it all for me. But these are paintings that my spouse did, which I just love. Mel is an awesome artist, and I've got a Poirot and a Miss Marple and a Jeremy Brett version of Sherlock Holmes. The travel theme actually, I think, came about when we visited the Smoky Mountains, and I got a couple of these really great reprints of travel posters. I have another one on the wall over there. And then it just kind of spiraled from there, and I started getting all these flags and everything. And then I made a couple too. Sorry about the reflections. That's the soft boxes. You know, I just can't help it. I work in a basement. Here's the fluorescent lights. No kidding. It's real. So the 2 that I made are this Stonehenge one, and this is actually one that I made from a photo that I took when we were at Stonehenge, and then I styled it to look like the vintage style posters. I mean, you know, I did my version of it. So there's this Stonehenge one, sorry about the reflections, and then here's the second one I made for the Cliffs of Moher. Again, pardon the reflections. And that hangs in this part of my studio, which is not for sewing, but for all of my other random messy crap. And this is I call this my messy table, but this is where I do resin jewelry, like earrings like this, which I love. And I do my nails. I do gel overlay on my nails, so I do that over here too. So this is kind of like the department of anything that needs glue or messiness, that goes over here. And there's a couple of units here for more craft supplies, miscellaneous stuff in here like clay and more resin and silicone mold making supplies. And then I keep all my jewelry making supplies in this guy, including my huge department of glitter. See? I wasn't kidding. And then this is my pattern dresser, just a simple IKEA dresser that I painted red. And I keep my modern patterns and PDF patterns up in the top. And this drawer has my vintage patterns that I keep all in sleeves or in Ziplocs. And then the bottom drawer is just for patterns that are too big to fit up there or ones that I plan on getting rid of at some point. This is sort of the department of mending, including a purse that I've needed to fix in this box for like 3 years. But anyway, this is a shelf that I actually bought at Michael's and flipped upside down. It's meant to be a shelf on this side, but it can be a little tray on this side, and then I painted it. And I just keep inspiration patterns in here or patterns that I'm going to work on soon, things like that. And this is a vintage state sampler of embroidery that I bought at an estate sale or something at some point, and I love this. So back over on this wall, in this unit, I keep all sorts of things like my zippers and elastics embroidery supplies. I think they're in here. Yep, embroidery supplies in a couple of the drawers. All my serger threads, things like that. And then over in this unit, I have things like these. These have my ribbons. These are my vintage buttons. Well, really all buttons, but mostly vintage buttons. So I've got them organized by color. So these are red, orange, yellow, pink, blues and greens, black, white, brown, and then my belt buckle sides. This is one that I made that I really love, but it's a 1/4 of an inch too big for the belting that I have. So I'll have to use this pretty guy someday. Vintage knitting pattern booklets, various things like interfacing, silk organza, padding for shoulder pads and whatnot. Some of my sewing notebooks here. I kind of scratch notes first, but then I keep a big sewing notebook to keep a record of all my projects. And I put like a little piece of fabric in there and then write notes. So maybe I'll show this to you someday. I love this as a resource. I go back to this so frequently. So this is a really important part of my sewing. Down here, I've got more cubbies for random things like fabric that I use for facings. And then this is my muslin cubby of doom. Boy, you can cram a lot into a cubby. That's probably every muslin that I have made in at least 5 years, give or take a few, because sometimes I'll take bigger ones apart and reuse the fabric. But I periodically go back to them sometimes, so it's handy keeping them around. And then over here, I keep all of my threads. So I have them organized. I usually use Gutterman because I like the big spools, top stitching threads, and then my smaller Coats and Clark. And then I also keep things like silk thread for handmade buttonholes. Not that I do those very often, but on occasion. This is this really cute, teeny vintage loom. I'd love to try using that someday. And then that brings me to my sewing table where I get all the work done. Little motivational thought for you. Do your thing, comparison kills joy. Totally true. And this table, I just absolutely adore this table. Back up so you can see it. Oh yeah, trip over a chair. That's good too. And this is a table skirt that I made from this fun Cath Kidston London print fabric. And this was an endeavor to do this. It goes all around the table from that corner over to this corner. And I was soliciting opinions on Instagram when I did this on the best way to do it. And what I ended up doing was I attached it with Velcro. Let me see if you can see this. I attached this with Velcro. You can just see there. And I really like the idea because that means that I can take them off to wash them. And I made slits around about where I needed to feed my cords through because I didn't want the cords all just sitting everywhere. So the cord goes underneath that so the feet can go under there. And I'm pretty pleased with how that all works. And in case you're wondering why there's ribbons on the back of my chair, it's because I have this cool pillow, but also like I have a butt pillow and you know, it's not pretty. I haven't covered it, but this pillow likes to fall out on top of that one. And so I just, you know, I needed to kind of keep it in check. It's not like the tidiest solution, but I haven't thought of anything better. So I do have a few things under here, not much, but we can peek under. This is where I keep my muslin and my box of tracing paper mostly. This table setup works really well for me. I can sew here, wheel my chair over to my serger over here, and then I plotted out all the locations of everything else to work really well too, my ironing board and then my table, so I can just kind of go around as I need to. And then when I'm sewing, these are all my little doodads that I need when I sew. This is a great little vintage knitting box. See the little kittens in the yarn that I keep my sewing machine feet and snips and seam rippers in. I keep my bobbins here. A little cup for snipped threads, which has a little dent in it because when I hung this shelf, I didn't do a good enough job the first time and it fell immediately onto this and dented the cup. So I had to rehang it. And then this is a cute little vintage scarf from Australia from my friend Bex, who I met through vintage sewing and knitting. Then over here, there's lots of miscellaneous crafting supplies like glue sticks and fabric paint and dyes and things like that. And then over by my ironing board, I've got this big IKEA unit, and this sort of houses a little bit of everything. My bra making supplies are over here. I keep my fabric scraps over here. Big bulky fabrics like minky and fleece that take up a ton of space. This is for decorative elastics. I keep rayon seam binding and stay tape in here that I use all the time. My clapper, things like that. So this is mostly everything. And it's just a super functional space for me. I absolutely love it, and I hope you enjoyed a look at it. So I hope you enjoyed this little look into my sewing studio. I hope to have fun with this channel, and if you're into vintage and sewing and knitting, then stick around. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Maybe spread the word and share the love. It's a long road that I'm going to be on to build this channel from scratch, and a ton to learn still, and I can use all the help that I can get to help spread the word and grow this channel. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.